Captain James stood on the bridge of his spaceship, staring out at the swirling colors of the planet below. He had traveled many light years, but this place was unlike anything he had ever seen. The surface was a mix of deep blue oceans and towering green mountains, all under a sky that shimmered with two bright suns. The crew buzzed with excitement as they prepared for landing. "This is going to be amazing," shouted one of the crew members, a young soldier named Alex. He was eager to explore the new world. James smiled at Alex's enthusiasm, but felt a sense of caution. He had heard stories about the creatures that lived on this planet. Some were friendly, while others were dangerous. As the spaceship descended, the landscape grew larger and more detailed. James could see strange plants swaying in the wind and bright flowers blooming everywhere. It looked like a paradise, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His mission was to gather information, and he knew they had to be careful. The ship touched down softly on the ground. The crew cheered, ready to step out and explore. James led them out of the spaceship, taking a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. It smelled sweet, like flowers after rain. They had landed in a wide-open field filled with colorful plants. James felt a mixture of excitement and fear. "Stay close, everyone," James said, raising his voice. "We don't know what we might find here." The crew nodded, but their eyes sparkled with curiosity. They spread out a little, looking at the beautiful surroundings. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed from the nearby mountains. James's heart raced. The stories had mentioned a giant alien creature living on this planet, and he wondered if this was it. "Did you hear that?" Alex whispered, his face pale. "Stay calm," James replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We need to find out what that noise is. Let's move quietly." The team moved carefully through the tall grass. They could see the mountains in the distance, rising high into the sky. As they approached, the roar grew louder, shaking the ground beneath their feet. James felt a mix of fear and determination. He had to see what was making that sound. Suddenly, they reached a rocky area at the base of the mountains. There, hidden among the rocks, they saw it, an enormous creature. It stood at least 8 feet tall, with thick, powerful limbs and a body covered in tough green skin. Its eyes were bright and intelligent, scanning the area. The behemoth seemed to be watching them, but it did not move. James's heart raced. The stories had painted the creature as a monster, but it looked more curious than aggressive. The soldiers behind him whispered nervously, their hands on their weapons. James raised a hand to signal them to stay quiet. He wanted to understand this creature, not fight it. "Look at its eyes," James said softly. "I think it's scared, just like us." Alex squinted, trying to see the creature better. "Do you think it will attack?" James shook his head. "We won't know until we try to connect with it. We can't assume it's a threat without understanding its intentions." As he spoke, the behemoth stepped forward, towering over the soldiers. James felt a surge of fear but stood his ground. The creature sniffed the air, and its gaze locked onto James. For a moment, everything was still. James knew this was a crucial moment. "Everyone, stay back," James instructed, taking a deep breath. He took a cautious step forward, wanting to show that he meant no harm. "I'm Captain James. I come in peace." The behemoth tilted its head, watching him closely. It made a low sound, almost like a growl, but James didn't back away. Instead, he reached out a hand slowly, hoping to show his intentions. "Please, don't be afraid," he said gently. "I just want to talk." To his surprise, the creature stopped growling and took a small step closer. James's heart soared with hope. Perhaps they could communicate. The behemoth's eyes softened as it studied him. James could feel the tension in the air slowly fading. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted their moment. Another soldier accidentally dropped a piece of equipment, causing it to crash to the ground. The behemoth jumped back, its eyes wide with fear. James cursed under his breath, realizing they had scared it. "Stay still," he shouted to his crew, who were just as startled. James quickly returned his focus to the behemoth. He knew he had to regain its trust. "I'm sorry. We didn't mean to frighten you." James took another step forward, trying to remain calm. The behemoth watched him carefully, its breathing slow and steady. Slowly, it began to relax, and James felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to connect. This was just the beginning of their adventure on this strange planet, and James was determined to understand the creature that had both terrified and fascinated him. The first meeting. Captain James stood still, watching the giant alien creature before him. Its large eyes, filled with curiosity, slowly shifted from him to the rest of the crew. The tension in the air was thick, and James could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that this moment could change everything. "Stay calm," James whispered to his team, who stood several feet behind him. They watched, their faces a mix of fear and fascination. James raised his hand again, hoping to show that he meant no harm. The behemoth took a step forward, its massive foot leaving a deep print in the soft earth. James felt a rush of excitement mixed with fear. He had never seen a creature like this before. Its skin looked rough and green, with strange patterns that shifted in the sunlight. Despite its size, there was something almost graceful about how it moved. "Hello," James said softly, his voice steady. "I'm Captain James. Can you understand me?" The creature stopped moving. Its large eyes blinked slowly, as if it were processing his words. James held his breath, waiting for a response. He knew that most of his crew wanted to run, but he felt a strange connection with this alien being. He believed it could sense his intentions. After what felt like an eternity, the behemoth made a sound. It was a low rumble that echoed around them. The crew flinched, ready to react, but James stood firm. "It's okay. It's just trying to communicate," he said, trying to reassure everyone. The behemoth leaned closer, its eyes narrowing as it examined James. He could see its long, sharp teeth, but they didn't seem threatening. Instead, James felt a sense of wonder. This creature was not just a monster. It was alive and intelligent. James took a deep breath and took another small step forward. "I come in peace," he repeated. "I want to understand you. Please, can you show me you mean no harm?" The behemoth tilted its head, and for a moment, it seemed to ponder James's words. Then, slowly, it opened its mouth and let out a softer sound, almost like a hum. The noise vibrated in the air, and James felt a wave of warmth wash over him. The crew gasped, but James remained focused. "See, it's trying to communicate," he said, feeling hopeful. "Let's not scare it." As the creature hummed, James noticed the way its body relaxed. He dared to take another step closer. The behemoth matched his movement, leaning down slightly, lowering its head to be at James's level. The two stared at each other, and in that moment, the soldier felt a spark of connection. "Can you tell me your name?" James asked gently. He wished he had a way to know if the behemoth understood. Suddenly, he had an idea. He pointed to himself and said, "James." Then he pointed to the behemoth. "What about you?" The behemoth hesitated for a moment. Then it opened its mouth again. This time, it made a sound that was a mix of a growl and a roar. James could see it was trying hard to produce the sound. It was rough and deep, echoing through the valley. The soldiers behind James looked at each other in confusion. "What did it say?" Alex whispered, his eyes wide with amazement. James smiled, realizing they had entered a new territory of communication. "I don't know yet, but we will find out." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device that could record sounds. "Let's capture its voice," he said excitedly. As he pressed the button on the device, the behemoth watched him curiously. "Don't worry," James reassured the creature. "This won't hurt you." The behemoth's eyes remained fixed on the device. James knew it was strange for the creature, just as this whole situation was strange for him. "I'll show you," he said, placing the device on the ground. He pressed the button again, and the sound of the behemoth's growl played back. The creature flinched slightly at the sound, and James noticed it step back. "I'm sorry if that startled you," he said quickly. "I just wanted to hear your voice again." To his surprise, the behemoth approached again, this time sniffing the device with its large nose. James held his breath. Would it accept this strange object? After a moment, the creature let out a soft sound, almost like a sigh. James took it as a sign of acceptance. "You're so brave," he said, smiling. "Together, we can learn so much." Suddenly, a rustling noise came from the bushes nearby. The crew jumped back, eyes wide with fear. James turned, ready for anything. The behemoth shifted, its body tense again. "Everyone, stay behind me," James commanded. He had to protect his team while showing the behemoth he was not afraid. Out of the bushes stepped another creature, smaller but just as strange. It looked like a baby version of the behemoth, with big eyes and soft fur. The smaller creature made a squeaky sound, and James realized this was the behemoth's young one. James felt a wave of compassion wash over him. "It's okay," he said gently. "You have a family." The behemoth looked between James and its young one, and for the first time, it seemed to smile. This was the start of something special. James knew they had begun to build a bridge between their worlds, and he was determined to keep exploring, finding common ground. Captain James stood near the behemoth and its young one, feeling a sense of hope. The giant creature watched him closely, its big eyes filled with curiosity. James knew this was a moment to build trust, and he wanted to show the behemoth that he meant no harm. "Look," James said, turning to the younger creature. "You have a family. That's wonderful." He smiled at the baby behemoth, whose fur was soft and fluffy. It bounced on its feet, watching its parent closely. The behemoth let out a low rumble, almost like a purr. James took this as a good sign. He stepped forward, still cautious. "I want to help," he said softly. "I want to understand your world." As James spoke, he noticed that the baby behemoth was mimicking its parent. It copied the way the giant creature moved, trying to stand tall and proud. James chuckled softly. "You're very brave," he said to the little one. "You will grow strong, just like your parent." The baby behemoth tilted its head, looking at James with wide eyes. It seemed to like his voice. James felt encouraged and decided to try to connect further. "Can I show you something?" he asked, pulling out his small recording device again. He pressed the button, and the sound of their earlier growl filled the air. The baby behemoth jumped back slightly, startled by the noise. The larger creature immediately moved protectively in front of it, letting out a low growl. James quickly raised his hands in a calming gesture. "It's okay. I'm sorry," he exclaimed. "I just wanted to share your sound." Slowly, the giant behemoth relaxed. It looked back at James, as if to say it understood. The baby peered around its parent, still curious. James took a step back, allowing the behemoth to feel safe. "I didn't mean to frighten you," he said gently. "Let's try again." This time, James picked up a stick from the ground. He drew a simple shape in the dirt, trying to create something that looked like the behemoth. "This is you," he said excitedly. He hoped the creature would see the effort he was making to connect. The behemoth watched him carefully. Its large eyes flickered with interest. James continued to draw, adding more details. The creature leaned closer, sniffing the dirt where James had made his marks. It let out a series of soft sounds, almost like it was trying to communicate back. "You like it," James cheered, feeling a wave of joy. The baby behemoth bounced in place, clearly excited by the interaction. James noticed that the young creature was imitating its parent again, mimicking the soft sounds it was making. "Can you show me what you can do?" James asked, glancing at the larger behemoth. "Maybe we can share our talents." The behemoth stepped back, giving James space. It lowered its head and let out a series of deep roars that echoed in the valley. The sounds were powerful yet beautiful, like a song of the wild. James's heart raced with excitement. This was more than just a creature. It was a being with a voice, with emotions. "Wow!" James exclaimed, clapping his hands together. "That was amazing. Can you teach me how to make those sounds?" The behemoth paused, tilting its head. It seemed to consider James's request. After a moment, it took a deep breath and let out another roar, this time with a softer tone. James tried to copy the sound, attempting to mimic the deep growl. The baby behemoth watched closely, and James couldn't help but smile at its cute expression. "Like this?" he asked, attempting the growl again. It came out more like a cough, and the baby behemoth let out a small squeak of laughter. The giant creature turned to its young one and made a sound that seemed to say, "Be patient." James laughed along with them. "I'll keep trying," he promised, feeling a warm sense of belonging. They were beginning to connect, and that felt powerful. After some time, James suggested, "What if we share more about our worlds?" He pointed to the mountains in the distance. "I could show you how humans explore, and you can show me what you do here." The behemoth seemed to understand. It made a series of low sounds, almost like agreement, and took a step toward the mountains. James felt a thrill of excitement. "Let's go," he said, leading the way. As they walked, James talked about his home planet, Earth. He shared stories about the forests, oceans, and animals that lived there. He described how humans work together to solve problems and protect their homes. The behemoth listened intently, occasionally looking back at its baby, who bounced along with them. In return, the behemoth showed James the beauty of its land. It pointed to the colorful flowers and strange trees, making sounds that seemed to express pride. James marveled at the different plants, some of which glowed softly in the dim light. "This is incredible," James said, crouching down to touch a glowing flower. It felt warm and pulsed gently in his hand. He looked up at the behemoth, who watched with curious eyes. "Thank you for sharing this with me." The sun began to set, casting a golden light across the landscape. James felt a deep connection with the behemoth and its young one. They were different, yet in that moment, they were the same. They both wanted to understand their worlds and protect their families. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, James knew they were just beginning to find common ground. This was the start of a friendship that could change everything. The real story. As Captain James walked alongside the behemoth, he felt a growing sense of friendship. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the landscape in shades of orange and purple. The young behemoth bounced around them, its playful energy lighting up the evening. James smiled at the joy of the moment, but sensed that there was more to learn about these incredible creatures. "Can you show me more about your home?" James asked the behemoth, hoping to understand its world better. The giant creature nodded slowly, its massive head moving with grace. James felt excitement building within him. They were not just exploring a planet. They were about to discover a deeper story. The behemoth led the way toward a large rock formation, where the ground was covered in vibrant green plants and glowing mushrooms. James followed closely, eager to learn. As they approached, the behemoth stopped and pointed with its huge arm. "This place is special, isn't it?" James asked, glancing around. The scenery was stunning, but he sensed a heaviness in the air. The behemoth made a low sound, one that seemed to carry sadness. James's heart ached with curiosity. What happened here? The behemoth lowered its head, its eyes looking distant. It let out a series of deep sounds that seemed to tell a story. James listened carefully, hoping to understand its meaning. After a moment, the behemoth began to move its hands, mimicking actions as it continued to communicate. With each gesture, James started to piece together the story. The behemoth was showing him images of a beautiful land filled with life and harmony. There were other creatures, similar to the behemoth, living peacefully. James could almost see them playing, eating, and protecting each other. Then, the behemoth's mood shifted. Its expression changed to one of anger and sadness. It pointed to the mountains, where dark clouds began to gather. James felt a chill run down his spine. He could sense that something terrible had happened. The giant creature made loud, booming sounds that echoed through the valley. James realized it was telling him about an invasion. He felt a rush of anger as he listened. "Invaders," he repeated, his voice low. "Other aliens came here." The behemoth nodded, its eyes burning with emotion. It began to show how the invaders had destroyed the land, cutting down trees and scaring the creatures away. James's heart sank as he watched the behemoth's movements, each one filled with pain and loss. "Did you fight them?" James asked, feeling a strong desire to help. The behemoth's eyes darkened. It shook its head slowly. James understood. They had tried to protect their home, but the invaders were too powerful. James felt a fire ignite inside him. "We can fight back together," he said firmly. "I can help you. Humans are strong when we work together." The behemoth looked at James, and for the first time, a flicker of hope appeared in its eyes. The young behemoth chirped excitedly, bouncing around them. James smiled at the little one's spirit. "We'll protect your home," he promised. After the behemoth finished sharing its story, it led James deeper into the rocky area. They reached a hidden cave that glowed with a soft blue light. The behemoth gestured for James to enter. Inside, the walls were covered in beautiful paintings, telling tales of their history. James marveled at the artwork. He could see images of behemoths, trees, and stars. It was a story of life, connection, and love. "This is incredible," he exclaimed, tracing a finger along the drawings. The behemoth watched James closely, its eyes filled with pride. It began to make sounds, as if it were singing. The melody echoed through the cave, warm and inviting. James felt the music in his heart, resonating with the pain and beauty of the behemoth's story. "I want to share this with my crew," James said after the behemoth finished its song. "They need to know what you've been through. Together, we can make a difference." The behemoth nodded, understanding the importance of sharing their story. It turned to the young one and made soft sounds. The baby behemoth seemed to understand, looking up at James with bright eyes. As they exited the cave, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew they had to act fast. "Let's go back to my team," he said, feeling the surge of determination. "We need to prepare." The behemoth and its young one followed closely, their presence comforting. James felt proud to stand beside them. They were not just a giant creature and its baby. They were allies in a fight for their home. When they reached the open field where James had first met the behemoth, the crew was waiting. They looked worried but also curious. James stepped forward, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Everyone," he called out, gathering their attention. "I have something important to share." He took a deep breath, glancing back at the behemoth and its young one. "This is our new friend. They have faced great danger, and we need to help them protect their home." The soldiers exchanged glances, some still skeptical, but others felt the weight of James's words. He quickly explained the behemoth's story, using simple language to convey the truth of the invasion and the pain it had caused. "Together, we can stand against the invaders," James urged, feeling the energy in the air shift. "If we unite, we can show them that this world belongs to the behemoths and that we will protect it." The crew looked at each other, and slowly, nods of agreement began to form. James felt a surge of hope. They were ready to join forces, and he knew this was just the beginning of their fight. Tension among soldiers. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the camp where Captain James and his team had gathered. The mood was tense. Everyone was excited about the behemoths and their promise to unite against the invaders, but uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog. James stood at the center of the camp, watching as the soldiers moved around. Some were packing supplies, while others were sharpening their weapons. He could hear whispers among the crew, their voices low and worried. They were unsure about trusting the giant alien creatures. "Captain," Sergeant Alex called out, approaching with a furrowed brow. "We need to talk." James nodded, sensing the seriousness in his friend's tone. "What's on your mind?" he asked. "It's about the behemoths," Alex replied, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Some of the men think we shouldn't trust them. They believe we could be walking into a trap." James felt a wave of frustration. "They've shown us nothing but kindness. They need our help just as much as we need theirs," he said firmly. "I know, but—" Alex hesitated. "They're aliens, Captain. We don't know their true intentions. What if they lead us into danger?" Before James could respond, a group of soldiers gathered nearby, their voices rising in anger. "We can't risk it," one shouted. "What if the behemoths turn on us?" James felt his heart race. Tension was rising among his crew. "Everyone, listen," he called out, stepping toward the group. "We are not enemies here. We're all fighting for our lives." But the soldiers continued to argue. "How can we trust them?" Another soldier yelled. "They're just animals. What do they know about fighting?" James took a deep breath, trying to calm the situation. "These animals are intelligent beings. They have a history, a culture. We need to understand that," he said, hoping to reason with them. "But they're still dangerous," someone shouted from the back. "We should be preparing for battle, not making friends." The argument grew louder, and James could see the divide forming among his men. Some looked ready to support him, while others were filled with doubt and fear. The behemoth and its young one watched from a distance, their expressions showing concern. "Alex, come with me," James said, trying to pull his friend away from the chaos. They walked a few steps away from the group. "What do you think? Should I call a meeting and share everything we learned from the behemoths?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It might help, but I worry it won't change their minds. Some people just don't want to believe." James nodded, feeling the weight of leadership on his shoulders. "I need to try. If we don't work together, we'll never stand a chance against the invaders." Returning to the group, James raised his hands to get their attention. "Everyone, let's take a moment to hear what the behemoths have to say about their world," he suggested, hoping to bridge the gap. A few soldiers grumbled, but curiosity flickered in their eyes. "Fine," one soldier said reluctantly. "Let's hear their story." James called to the behemoth and its young one, gesturing for them to come forward. The giant creature moved slowly, its massive form towering over the soldiers. The baby behemoth bounced beside its parent, looking both excited and nervous. "This is our ally," James said, feeling the surge of pride. "They have a story to tell, one that we need to hear." The behemoth lowered its head, its eyes scanning the crowd. It began to make soft sounds, low and melodic. James translated as best as he could, explaining how the behemoths had lived in peace before the invasion, and how their land was now in danger. As the creature shared its story, the tension among the soldiers began to shift. Some listened intently, while others still looked skeptical. James watched closely, hoping they would start to understand. When the behemoth finished, the young one let out a cheerful sound, which caused a few soldiers to smile. "They just want to protect their home," James said, feeling hopeful. "Just like we do." However, one soldier stepped forward, crossing his arms. "But how do we know they won't turn on us when the fighting starts?" he asked. "They could be using us to fight their battles." "Because we have to trust each other," James replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "If we don't build that trust, we're doomed to fail." The crowd murmured, and for a moment, it felt like hope was fading. But then, Alex spoke up. "What if we train together? We can learn from each other. We can teach the behemoths our tactics, and they can teach us their strengths." James felt a spark of excitement. "That's a great idea. We can prepare for battle while building trust. Let's create a plan to work together." Slowly, the soldiers began to nod, some showing signs of agreement. The behemoth watched, its large eyes flickering with understanding. The baby behemoth chirped happily, Sensing the change in the air, James stepped forward, feeling the tension lift. "Let's make this work. We can defend our homes together. United, we are stronger than we could ever be alone." With a renewed sense of purpose, the soldiers started to discuss training strategies, blending their ideas with the Behemoth's natural strengths. The air buzzed with energy as they began to see the possibilities. As the sun rose higher in the sky, James felt a wave of hope wash over him. They had begun to bridge the gap between worlds, and with each passing moment, the bond between humans and behemoths grew stronger. A new threat. The training camp was buzzing with energy as Captain James and his crew worked alongside the behemoths. Every day they practiced tactics, shared skills, and learned from each other. The bond between humans and the giant creatures grew stronger with each passing hour. Soldiers began to see the behemoths not as animals but as powerful allies. One morning, while the sun was still low in the sky, James gathered the soldiers for a meeting. "Today we will focus on our strategy," he announced. "But we must also stay alert. We don't know when the invaders will strike again." The soldiers nodded, their faces serious. Just then, a young soldier named Ryan rushed into the camp, panting heavily. "Captain, you need to come quick," he gasped. James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "What is it, Ryan?" "There's something in the sky, something big and dark," Ryan said, pointing towards the horizon. The soldiers turned to look, their hearts racing with fear. James quickly scanned the sky. In the distance, dark shapes moved among the clouds. The behemoth and its young one stood beside James, their eyes wide with concern. "What do you see?" the behemoth asked in its deep voice. "Possible enemy ships," James replied, feeling a chill run down his spine. "We need to prepare." The soldiers moved quickly, grabbing their weapons and forming a defensive line. The behemoth stood tall beside them, ready to fight. James felt a mix of fear and determination. They had worked hard to build trust, and now they had to protect each other. As the dark shapes approached, James could see they were indeed ships, large and menacing. They cast shadows over the camp, blocking out the sunlight. The soldiers watched in awe and fear as the ships landed, kicking up dust and debris. "Stay calm," James shouted, trying to keep everyone focused. "We have trained for this. Remember your positions." The first ship opened its hatch, and a group of invaders emerged, their figures clad in dark armor. They looked menacing, with weapons drawn and expressions of rage on their faces. James's heart raced. They had come to reclaim the planet, and they would not be easy to defeat. The behemoth let out a loud roar, a sound of warning that echoed across the camp. The young one stood close, mimicking its parents' protective stance. James felt a surge of courage. "Prepare to fight," he yelled. As the invaders advanced, the soldiers took their positions, forming a strong line with their weapons ready. James raised his weapon, pointing it toward the approaching threat. "Remember what we learned. Fight together." The first clash came quickly. Soldiers fired their weapons, and the behemoths charged forward, using their massive size to create a wall of strength. The ground shook as they moved, and James felt the power of their alliance. The behemoth fought fiercely, swinging its massive arms and knocking invaders off their feet. James focused on his team, moving among them to encourage and direct. "Hold the line," he shouted, firing at an approaching enemy. "Don't give up." The battle raged on, chaos swirling around them. Sounds of weapons firing and creatures roaring filled the air. James could see the fear in the eyes of some soldiers, but he also saw determination. They were fighting not just for their lives, but for the behemoths and their home. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out, shaking the ground beneath them. James turned to see one of the enemy ships firing from above. "Take cover," he yelled, ducking behind a large rock. The behemoth moved swiftly to protect its young one, shielding it with its massive body. As the smoke cleared, James noticed some of his soldiers were wounded. Panic began to spread among them, and he knew they needed to regroup. "Everyone, fall back," he commanded. "We need to reorganize." The soldiers moved quickly, retreating to a safer position. The behemoth and its young one followed closely, their presence comforting amid the chaos. James looked around, seeing the fear in the faces of his team. "Listen," he shouted, raising his voice above the noise. "We have to remember our training. We are stronger together." As they regrouped, James felt a sense of urgency. The invaders were relentless, and they had to come up with a new plan. "We need to take out that ship," he said, pointing to the one that had caused the explosion. "If we can disable it, we'll have a better chance." The behemoth nodded, understanding the plan. "We can create a distraction," it suggested, its voice steady. "Then you can attack." James felt a rush of hope. "Yes, that's perfect." The behemoth signaled to its young one, and together they moved toward the enemy ship, making loud roars to draw attention. The soldiers watched in awe as the giant creatures charged forward, fearless in the face of danger. "Now's our chance," James yelled. "Follow me." He led the soldiers in a coordinated attack, aiming for the enemy ship while the behemoths created chaos around them. As the soldiers moved, they felt a surge of courage. The behemoths were fighting fiercely, and their bravery inspired the humans to push forward. James fired at the ship, hitting it with precision. But just as victory seemed within reach, more enemy reinforcements appeared from the nearby forest. New ships landed, and new invaders emerged, ready to fight. The soldiers gasped, fear flooding back into their hearts. "This isn't over," James shouted, determination burning in his chest. "We can't back down now. We fight for our lives and for the behemoths." The battle was far from won, and the stakes had never been higher. Together, they had to find a way to overcome this new threat and protect the world they had come to love. A lasting friendship. The battle raged on as the soldiers fought fiercely alongside the behemoths. Captain James felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They had faced overwhelming odds, but their determination to protect each other pushed them forward. As enemy ships continued to land, the chaos grew. James could see his soldiers moving bravely, but the new wave of invaders threatened to break their line. He took a deep breath and called out to his team. "We can't let them push us back. We must stand together." Beside him, the behemoth roared, its powerful voice echoing across the battlefield. The young one bounced nervously, watching the fight unfold. James felt a surge of protectiveness. "Stay close," he shouted to the behemoths. "We will fight together." The giant creature nodded, and they charged into the fray. The behemoth swung its massive arms, sending invaders flying. James fought with all his strength, knowing that every action counted. The bond between him and the behemoths grew stronger with each enemy they faced together. Despite the chaos, James noticed something incredible. The behemoths were learning from the humans, adapting their movements and strategies. They began to work in perfect harmony, creating a powerful force against the invaders. As the battle continued, James spotted Sergeant Alex nearby, trying to help a wounded soldier. James rushed to assist. "We have to keep moving, Alex," he urged. "The fight isn't over." Alex nodded, but his expression was grim. "We're outnumbered, Captain. I don't know how much longer we can hold on." James looked around, assessing the situation. Soldiers were falling, and the enemy seemed endless. Just then, a loud explosion erupted from the enemy ship that had been firing on them. James turned to see the behemoths had launched an attack of their own, using their size and strength to strike back. "Look," James shouted, feeling a spark of hope. "They're fighting back." The behemoth charged forward, knocking down enemies left and right. The soldiers cheered as the giant creature led the way. James felt adrenaline coursing through his veins. They had a chance. With renewed energy, the soldiers pushed forward, joining the behemoth in the fight. Together, They created a wave of strength that began to push back the invaders. Each roar from the behemoth fueled their courage, and James felt a deep connection with the giant creature. As they fought, James spotted the enemy ship that had caused them so much trouble. "We need to take that down," he shouted, pointing at the ship. "If we can destroy it, we can turn the tide of this battle." The behemoth nodded, understanding the plan. It made a loud sound to gather the attention of its young one. Together, they charged toward the enemy ship, creating a distraction as James led the soldiers in an assault. They fought their way through the chaos. Reaching the base of the ship, James could feel the vibrations of the battle beneath his feet. "Now, let's take it down," he yelled, rallying the soldiers. With a coordinated attack, they fired at the ship's vulnerable points. The behemoth swung its massive arms, creating openings for the soldiers to strike. The combined efforts began to pay off. The ship shook violently, smoke rising from the damage. As the ship began to crumble, the invaders' morale faltered. The tide was turning, and James could see fear spreading among their enemies. "Push forward," he shouted. "We can win this." The soldiers roared in response, feeling the momentum shift in their favor. With each step, they pressed closer to victory. The behemoth and its young one fought valiantly, standing tall beside them. Suddenly, the enemy ship exploded, sending debris flying in every direction. James ducked instinctively, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. When the dust settled, he looked around, astonished. The invaders were retreating, their ships taking off into the sky. "We did it," Alex shouted, a wide grin spreading across his face. The soldiers erupted in cheers, celebrating their hard-fought victory. James looked to the behemoth, gratitude swelling in his heart. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We couldn't have done this without you." The behemoth nodded, its eyes shining with pride. "We fought together as friends," it replied. "This bond will last." As the camp settled into a quiet victory, James and the behemoths took a moment to reflect. They had faced danger and uncertainty, but through it all, they had forged a lasting friendship. James knew that their bond would only grow stronger as they continued to protect this planet together. The young behemoth approached James, tilting its head curiously. James knelt down to meet its gaze. "You were amazing out there," he said with a smile. The young one chirped happily, its excitement infectious. "From now on, we will protect each other," James promised, looking between the behemoths and his team. "We have created something special here, a bond that will withstand anything." As night fell, the camp was filled with laughter and stories of the battle. Soldiers shared tales of bravery, while the behemoths listened intently, their eyes sparkling with understanding. James felt a warmth in his heart, knowing they had built a bridge between their worlds. With each passing day, the friendship between humans and behemoths grew deeper. They had shown each other strength, courage, and loyalty. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united as one. As the stars shone brightly overhead, James looked up, filled with hope for the future. They were not just allies. They were friends who would stand together, no matter what came their way.